Good evening, class. Welcome back to another night of plumbing. Okay, we have a number of things to go over. Now, this is being recorded before your class, obviously, but we've already talked briefly about makeup air and also about that bathroom that you sketched, that 1 inch to scale bathroom, which we'll talk about later. The video the YouTube video on construction. Like I said, it was a pretty good overall general video information. There were a few things, though, I didn't think they covered well enough. Now, construction, some years we don't. We do very, very little of it. And this year, I'm not going to get into it too deeply. We don't have time to do um, many nights of construction. That's another trait. However, there's some construction that you really need to know to install the plumbing. Okay, now some of you are probably already doing your own work on the side, and you're aware of, you have to be aware of a number of things, especially, for example, putting in a Silcock outside faucet hose bib. So what I'd like to do is very, very quickly run through a house, starting with the footing, and we'll bring it up to the top of the foundation. We'll do a Silcock, and we'll go from there. All right, so let's take a look. Now, I know that some of you Tier 2 guys in particular are very familiar with this stuff, but some of you Tier 1 guys, not so much. I remember back when I was at Tier 1, what they called Tier 1, it was my first year. I didn't ask a whole lot of questions because my hand would have been up very often. I was very new to the trade, and a lot of terms that were used I was not familiar with, nor was I familiar with very many construction terms at all. Okay, let's start with the footing. Footing is about 2 feet deep front to back and about maybe a foot thick, maybe a little less than that. It's roughly twice the width of the foundation wall. Now, foundation walls typically are 8, 10, and 12. 12 not so often, usually 8 and 10. And the footing provides a base for that. Something like this here. Okay, and there's a thing here called a keyway. So when this is poured, I guess it can't shift. Not our concern. All right, one thing. When you're doing work in a house, never mess around with the footing if you can help it. Okay, you don't want any trouble from the building inspector. Also, this is a miserable thing to cut through. Anybody here who's tried it, you'll notice a lot of stone in there. It's very hard, and there's not much future in going 2 feet through it. So go over it or go under it. Okay, don't go through it. In a pinch, sometimes you can kind of nip off the end of it like that. And the reason you did that, even that's a little bit much, is so that you can run a pipe down the wall and right by here, okay? And over like that. You want to keep it tucked in. And if the point is here, you got to kick the pipe out that much more. Okay? So if you have to, you can just kind of nip off the end of it like that. Don't make it, and that's a little exaggerated. Don't want the building inspector coming down on you, so don't take too much. Okay. All right. Now, gotta remember to look at you guys in the camera there. What's that? Sounds like somebody's snoring out there. You're not supposed to snore this early. You gotta wait till I get going. All right. Get rid of this keyway here. All right, now on top of the wall, I'm gonna put 2x6, like that. It's usually lined up with the outside of the wall. This being the outside of the house. Let's put some dirt in out there. Some grass, about this high. Okay, that's the outside. Okay, not our concern. They put the sill down, but you got to understand how this goes. The sill goes down like this here. Now, on a very old house, the sill used to be solid wood. I lived in a house with that. It was like 6 or so by 6, and it was full size lumber, unlike today. So this is a 2 by 6, really inch and a half by 5.5. Okay, and under it, this I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's called sill seal, SEAL. It's like a cushiony roll of. It's almost like a packing they use to pack stuff so it doesn't get damaged. It's kind of, for those of you not familiar with it, it's foam and it compresses, and it works really good. I remember many years ago, probably when I first started, they didn't have that. And anybody who was working in an old house, you can feel a draft blowing right through here. This is a huge improvement, right? To keep out the cold and the drafts, the sill seal. And some of you guys said you use it to wrap a pipe when you're going to have concrete poured around it. So to protect the pipe from being encased in concrete, which is dangerous because somebody whacks it before it's poured, before you have a chance to cut the pipe down, you got a nightmare dealing with it because you got to chop into the floor. Okay, so sill seal is what they put underneath here. All right, now next thing is what goes on top of that. All right, let's try this. These are going to be the floor joist. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why are we even bothering this? Now, looking at it this way, the house is going to be running to our left. We're standing at the corner of the house. This is the ground. All right, so this here is, I believe they call that a rim joist. So the ends of the 2-bys that go right to the outside need one piece to make it all the way around the house. So at either end, you have these here. And this would be usually a 2x10 like that. Okay, now at the top of that, this would be a 2x10. The top of this here is the subfloor. Right? And then on top of that, we're going to have a 2x4 or 2x6, depending on what the construction is. I suspect there's more 2x6s going in now for exterior wall, so you can put in some more serious insulation. You get a lot more insulation out of a 2x6. I think it goes from like a R15 to maybe an R21. It's quite a difference. So we'll just pretend that this is a 2x4 wall. Okay. Now you come along, and then on the outside of the house, let's try a different color. Yeah, let's try. We'll go back to blue. They put the sheathing on the outside. This here would be the 2x4. Now, if you guys wondering where I'm going with all this, no, I'm not trying to make copies of anybody, and I'm not one either. But you'll see in a minute. All right, so on the outside of the house, we're going to put some plywood, right? Or that wafer board, what do they call that? That's exterior sheathing, those big chips of wood, flake board, whatever they call it, and covers the outside of the house. So all of this is invisible. Now then, the carpenters come in and they do their thing with the shingles, and the shingles are, so many inches, they call it, to the weather. A little tough for me to draw. I'm not very good at this. Okay, you got the idea. It's not a very good drawing at all. Okay, let me change that a little bit. That's better. Okay. So from the outside, you have no idea what's going on over here. And if you're not familiar with construction, you're just guessing. So let's say that you're a fairly new apprentice. You talk a really good game, got yourself a pretty good job, and the boss tells you where to put the outside faucet. He said, going back of the house, 2 feet from the corner in the backyard, to the right, drill in a sill cop. That's it. That's your directions. Now, meanwhile, you've done some bluffing to get to where you are. and you haven't done this before, certainly without supervision. So where you want to go is probably about right here. I would say right in the middle of here. So your outside faucet is going to look like kind of like this here. It's going to come out here and then down. Now I'm going to make it a frost free. So frost freeze comes, that's how you can tell a frost free, by the way. The handle is going straight in. It's not coming down at an angle, right? 45-degree angle. If it is, it's not a frost free. Most of the guys now are putting in frost freeze. Okay, and your frost free, by the way, is like this. And the washer for this is back here, right about there, right? Those you know have done these, know what I'm talking about. And they come in 6, 8, 10, and 12-inch increments as far as the length of these things. I'd get the long one. If you're picking it up yourself, get the long one. The further you are in, the better. The idea of this is to get this washer in here away from the outside, right? You don't want this washer exposed to the cold weather. Now, here's the thing you might not know. You need a shutoff inside, even with this frost free. So inside the cellar, you're going to have a shutoff, right? With the handle usually so it's accessible straight down or at least on the side. This valve has a little screw on the end of it, like maybe about a 1/4 inch, and you loosen it and the water comes out. That's a waste. The best one of these is a ball valve. A ball valve with the waste on it. That's the best. The old style globe valve, the wheel handle, they're red or blue. They're okay. They'll last. You only turn them on twice a year or off, and that goes here. So even though it's frost free, do yourself a favor. In fact, when I get done with this class, I'm going to go take care of my frost free Silcock. I got 2 of them. I got to take care of them. They're exactly like this. They got inside shutoffs, but there's no guarantee they're not going to freeze, right? Now, one problem is if you have a frost-free Silcock and you don't shut it off, if the installer didn't pitch it, reverse it, because of the way the shingle is, think about it. The shingle is like this. I'm going to exaggerate this a bit. We'll say your faucet is here, right? Here's the handle. Here's the spout, right? This is exaggerated a lot, of course, because of the shingle, right? Each shingle kicks out like that. If you don't put a shim to kick this up, the water, and I know I mentioned this to one class this year, will build up in there. It happened to me, my own house. Geez, 45 years ago at least. I was an apprentice at the time, but I wasn't aware of this. I knew how the faucet worked, but I didn't know that if this was tilted down, that the water would collect in here. And it did. And the cold got in, right? It got in there somehow, and it froze the pipe. As a result, come springtime, when I turned the water on from here, I had a hole here. I can't really draw it, but it was like somebody stepped on a banana, and the water came flying out. Unfortunately, before it flooded my cellar, I could see it. There was a basement window right next to it. Very lucky. So do yourself a favor. When you put in a frost free and you get that plastic wedge that comes with it, use it. Don't toss it. Use the wedge, and what the wedge does is it counteracts the shingle angle and kicks this up in the air so that you're either pitched slightly out, which is what you want, or at least flat, so the water can't build up. Okay, now, that's all well and good. But what about this part right here? Okay, first of all, you always put it in the middle of a shingle or the clapboard or whatever you got there. If it's vinyl siding, the stuff is wafer thin, and that can be a problem. You might even have to put a plate there, make something out of wood or whatever. But we're assuming now that it's solid. It's either solid, it's either shingle, clapboard, or that plastic shingles that are very expensive, but they're solid. Okay, so it's going to look like this. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, here's the problem. You have no idea what you're doing. If you reach in underneath here with your fingers, you can usually feel the top of the foundation, usually. Now, I've seen these shingles go all the way down like this. If you've got a garage that's cut into a hill, like a raised ranch, for example, and you walk out from the lower level, sometimes to hide all that concrete that's going to be showing, like concrete wall, they'll bring this shingle down like this here, because this is like down here. So to hide all this concrete, they'll put fairing, strap it right to here, to this here. They'll shoot it right into the wall, and then they'll put up like plywood, like 1/2 inch plywood, and then they'll put shingles on it. Okay, you think you're going to start drilling here, putting faucets? You can try it, though what's going to happen is your fancy $30 drill, that nice long twist drill, you're going to drive it right into the concrete. So before you drill anything, check out what's on the other side. Always check on what's on the other side. Okay, that's a little unusual, but I've seen it several times. Get back to this one. What you need to do is to ensure that you're feeling the top of the foundation wall. Then go in the cellar. Look for a window. Measure from the window to where you're going to be. Now, obviously, before you went in the basement, you checked it out from the outside. Go in the basement and look where you're going to be drilling through. Are there any maybe electrical line? Or worst case, how about the service for the house? You hadn't noticed it. Maybe it comes in maybe one bay over and cuts by here and then down to the meter. Well, if you find it the hard way, you're going to know about it, right? It's going to be very bad. For one thing, you probably wreck your drill, your bit, and it's going to be a big flash and very embarrassing. Okay, you don't need that. Okay, so always check out where you're drilling. Now, some of you guys have learned that lesson the hard way, haven't you? All right, we all have. So do that, and then figure out how high you're going to be. You want to be roughly in the middle of this floor joist, not too high, right? You don't want to be right up against the ceiling, nor do you want to be too low, because then you're going to be hitting the sill. One thing I left out about the sill: every 6 feet on the sill, roughly, you're going to see it's like a 3/8 inch bolt. It comes down like this. If you saw it before it was installed, it looks something like this here. And at the top, it has threads, right? And what they do is they put it in the wet concrete so that when this beam is put up, the sill is put up. Let's see. It's going to be like this. This is the 2x. And this here, another colors. Let's do green. We'll say that the concrete is like right here, right? And here's the here's the 2x6 that sits on top of it, all right, with the sill seal in the middle right here. Okay, this here now is in the concrete with this sticking up in the air. So what they do is, I've done it a few times myself, you let the concrete dry. Then when you take the sill itself, you put it on top and you give it a good smack with a hammer. You hit the wood and it marks where they are. And then you drill through, and that's how you put it in. And then there's I think there's a washer and a nut right here that they crank down. Okay, now in theory, I guess that's supposed to hold the wood to the foundation. I don't know how good it is, but it's there. Now, if you do enough of these, right, and you're a little careless, right, you could drill in and hit this. I've hit one or two of them in my time. You know, if one's up a little bit higher than usual, you could smack the top of it. And of course, it's soft steel. I don't think you'll wreck your drill on it. But obviously, what are you going to do? It's in your way. You'd have to cut that out. I mean, it could be a real pain in the butt. So again, when you check out where you're coming through, make sure that there's none of these in the way, right? These anchor bolts. Right? Make sure it's not going to like line up perfectly with the hole you're going to do. Okay. And now this one I always made a joke about. And I don't know anybody that's done it, but I'm sure somebody has. Let's say you don't know what you're doing. And the last thing you want to do is to ask your boss who's having a bad day. We'll say he had a bad weekend, bad night, got a big head, whatever his problem is. You don't want to go ask him. So you don't. So in your head, you're not sure about construction. So you don't want to go too low. So instead of going the second or third row up, you go maybe a little higher. Right? Well, it'll be easy to get to the faucet, but you forget what's inside. What's inside? You go in right about here. Right? We'll say that's your drill bit, right? Because the drill bit goes in first. If this house is already finished, if it's a rough, the house is rough, you're probably not a big deal. You just have to patch that shingle on the outside that you just screwed up, and you'll have to patch whatever's on the inside. Probably nothing. It's probably just roughed in. So you're going to be embarrassed because the carpenter will have to patch the hole unless you can figure out how to patch it. But if this is a finished house where you're just adding a silk caulk, so what's up with this? This here should have been in the basement. All right, you went down, you looked, it was there, or you didn't look. You're not. You're upstairs. We'll say that there's a long window there. You could wrap the drape or something around that, or maybe even better, drill into the leg of a chair, fancy chair. All right, so be sure that this is the main reason I'm telling you this, is you understand the construction part of it. You got the sill, 2x10, usually, could be a 12, but not often. And that's it. So you got to go from the top of the foundation to here is probably it's less than a foot. It's probably about 11 inches, right? And you want to be in the middle of that. So you reach in with your fingers, you figure you got about an inch, inch and a half, right, tucked over. So this shingle is over the edge. It always is. So the water doesn't go in there. And then you figure, do the math. And if you really want to be safe, invest in a pilot bit. It's like, it's about the size of the, on a hole saw, your 1/4 inch, the bit in the center, name escapes me, but get a feeler bit from Electrical Supply Place. They got good ones. They're very flexible, very sharp, and they're only about 1/4 inch diameter. You don't get too big a one. You want a small one. So if you screw up, that's the idea of using it. When you pop out, the hole that you make isn't too big, right? You don't want to go and blast in there with a 1-inch bit and find out it's wrong. So if you're not sure, put a feeler in first. You like that? Okay, fine. Switch it out for a hole saw. By the way, I wouldn't touch a shingle with anything but a hole saw. All right, so you do a feeler bit first, and then you get the your hole saw with the 1/4 inch bit in the center, same size as the feeler bit, and just drill in until you get to the joist, that rim joist or whatever you're hitting, or the plywood, and then I would switch off to a twist drill, right, or a self feed, what we call a self feed. That's a small one for self feed, so it'd probably be a twist drill, okay, for the rest of it. But initially, start out with a hole saw. You start out with any other bit, and what you're going to find is you're going to be splitting and cracking shingles or clapboard, and that doesn't look good. And once you split it, you can't really hide it. Okay? Now, there's a few tricks. You can rub a little dirt here and there, scuff it up, but do yourself a favor. Hole saw, and then as soon as you get through the shingles and you're hitting at least plywood, then switch off for a twist drill or something that's faster. Okay? I'm sure you know the sound of a nail. Sometimes you can't see them, that clicking sound. And if you hear anything like that, any weird noise when you got your twist drill in there, you better take it out because you're going to take a digger right out of your the cutting edge. Okay, that's it. That's cutting a silk caulk in and staying out of trouble. Okay, the feeler bit, good idea. Keep one of those in your truck. Okay, let's see how we're doing for time. All right, we got a little bit more time. Okay, getting bogged down on my silk caulk here. All right, now in the film, they mentioned a few other things, and one of them was the I don't know if I think they did refer to it, the center beam. a center beam looking down on it, these here are usually triple 2x10s or 12s. My house happens to be quadruple 2x12s, which is, I found, kind of unusual. But triple 2x10 would be like this here, right? And go off both sides. Now, this is not our concern. These lolly columns, they're steel posts filled with concrete. If you ever seen a carpenter, they actually have a big pipe cutter. They score it and then they snap it, right? It's thin steel and filled with concrete, so it's pretty cheap. Concrete is really good under compression, in other words, pressing down on it. So we don't have any business going near them. There's nothing, they're there. Just know the name of it. Now, this here, looking at it from the side, would look like this, with the lolly columns like that. Right, this is easy. Right, this is a fast. This one here, watch. Nothing. Lesson over. Don't drill it. Don't notch it. Don't even look at it. Stay away from the center beam. You wanna cause grief for your boss. Put holes in that. Right. Even if you put the hole over the beam, over the lolly column. Most inspectors are very jumpy about these things, and they should be. The whole way to the house, all of those joists from one end to the other all go over the center beam, right? In the center of the house. Now remember, when they use like 2x10, 2x10 can go 1.5 times that number. I think I told you guys that, right? I learned that when I was an inspector in a small town, Little Compton. And now I had the charts for this, and somebody told me that was how it was. And I looked in the charts, and they were right. It's within a few inches. Technically, this is not exactly right, but it's within a few inches one way or the other. Again, not our trade, but you got a span that's like reaching the maximum for like a 2x10. 15 feet would be a house where from the foundation to the center beam is 15 feet. That's maxed out. It's got no extra there to play with. You don't want to start drilling any more holes in that than you have to. Okay, while we're talking about construction, Silcock done. Let's take a look at water closet. If anything, this happens just as often or more often. All right, looking at a house, here's the outside wall right here. Now looking through the floor, which we can't see, of course, we got our 2x going every 16 inches. Something like this. Now, those of you who've done a number of new houses, it's just a matter of time before you're going to nail one of these with your water closet roughing in hole. Okay, so we'll say upstairs. I won't even draw the upstairs. Let's say that you got to put the water closet right there, perfectly centered. Murphy's Law. It's like something goes wrong, it does. It's going to be right on the center beam, 2x10. Doesn't matter the size. Okay, you can get an offset flange, and that will kick to the side like that. But you're still going to take a big piece out of that floor joist. So what do? If you're working for yourself, it's your business. What I suggest you do is go locate the carpenter or call him and tell him I'm hitting a floor joist for the water closet. What do you want to do? Once in a while, they'll tell you, just cut it right out. I don't agree with that at all. But if he says to cut it out and he said he'll box it in later, okay. Then you just take your Sawzall and cut that right out. Now, it's going to be hanging on the plywood floor, so don't worry about it. It's not going anywhere. And then you just do your business. What I suggest is cut out what you absolutely have to. Like put a Street 45 up into this plan. I put a Street 45 into that flange. Okay? So that you have to, but you still have to hollow out maybe a third to a half of this to do that. Now, let's say that you do what the contractor told you. He'll say, go a foot on either side. Okay, so you do. You just Sawzall it out of the way. Do your thing. Now, if you're going to keep it up above the inside the floor up in here, he better be aware of that because you're going to be going one way or the other, and he needs that space. So what he does, you've heard this term, head it off, right? you're going to head it off. Probably should double it up. Haven't been an inspector in a very long time, but I think you're supposed to double it up. But yeah, maybe not there, but here you do. Now watch this. This is where he has to double it up. So he's got to double up over here. So keep that in mind because you might have something going on over there yourself. All right, the reason is because with this out, which this has been cut out now for all practical purposes, this is holding up nothing. This has to pick up 50%. That picks up 50%. So it's called the header, and I believe this is the trimmer. Again, those names don't really mean much to us. But this is a big deal because I had a company who knew where the water closet was going, and they used to do this for me. I don't think this was doubled up. I'll take this back. Like I said, it's been a while. And they'd make a nice big box for me. This is wonderful. It's a problem. They'd put a box for me, but if I was like trying to hide the pipes because they're going to finish the ceiling, then I had to cut through something. I had to go through one of these 2x10s or whatever. I'd rather just notch out what I needed. But again, that was that particular company. So if you run into this right now, most of you aren't doing anything probably this size because it's a little bit big for what do you call it, moonlighting. So you're probably not dealing with it. If you ran into something like that, you probably just ask your boss. Okay, and I think, all right, I'm going to have to wrap this one up. Okay, I'm going to stop this. We'll finish that up on the other side, and I will see you guys in just a minute.